Okay, I think most of you are there. I'm going to have Devin kick things off a little bit. Again, I was telling Matt before a few of you signed on, unfortunately, the audio is a little difficult just because you weren't individually mic'd. But we had a decent crowd here to watch, and they got the gist of the story and quite a bit of the audio. It was just a little tough. But with that in mind, I think we'll have Devin kick things off a little bit. We have some questions that we'd like to have you respond to. So.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Now we're unmuted. Hello, hello.
Hello, how are you doing? This is Devin Baroga. I'm Vice President of Merritt County NAACP branch, 7139. We represent the last county to form an NAACP branch.
Read it. I think it's just from the.
Let me just go into the first question real fast. Early on in the play, we see Jordan name off a list of Black historical figures opposed to violence. Were there any historical or contemporary figures that served as inspiration for any of the characters in the play?
That sounds like a Carlton question.
Yeah, so can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Carlton.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
No, there was not. The characters specifically come from, honestly, different parts of me, different conversations I've had with African-American friends of mine or Caucasian friends of mine throughout different periods of time. Some of the conversations I had were not necessarily taken word for word, but like were put in the play. Yeah, all of the characters were either real people that I've spoken to or just different ideas in my head.
Okay, great. Question number 2. Let's see. The play touches on so many themes and ideas, including, but certainly not limited to white privilege, color blindness, economic inequality, white feminism, whitewashing, assimilation, toxic masculinity, and patriarchy. Is there any theme, idea, or issue that you hope to see included in the play that wasn't, or one that did not make it into the script, but you would have liked to see fleshed out more?
Wow, that's a good question. So there was a lot of themes in the play, and I'm actually surprised that through workshopping it, we got most of them in there. So yeah, I think out of all of those different, I think whatever you got from it was intended for you to get, and there was a lot in there. But no, I don't think I could have crammed another thing in there. Yeah, there was a lot.
That's great. Okay, so question number 3. The play touches on so many themes, and Okay, so this question: in local anti-racist groups, we talked a lot about how science fiction has been used as a tool to subvert dominant cultural narratives throughout history. Are there any science fiction pieces or other works that serve as inspiration for the Cleanup Project? Are there any performances that you drew from as actors?
Yeah. And Dee Dee's awesome. She's just working on some sound stuff. So don't mind. She's killing. So yeah, there were a couple. Well, there's a film called Dogville, starring Nicole Kidman. And a lot of the set design or the aesthetic feel for the play came from that. I love that. If you haven't seen it, it's a wonderful film. I'm not sure if it won awards or not, but it's basically the same, where it has this outline of the stage, and I wanted the impression of you the audience knowing that there are walls, but you can still see what's happening inside. So in Dogville, there's a lot of horrible things happening behind doors, and people are walking by like they don't see. But we, as the audience member, we know that the actor is pretending they don't see this happening. So there's something happens in your brain empathetically, I think, where you feel for the thing that's happening that you see. So in our play with Ryan, hiding under the table, he's hiding in plain sight. And not only does that, for me, add, tension, but hopefully some empathy for this person. So Dogville is one of those films. Children of Men is another film that is kind of post-apocalyptic and
that's a great movie.
Really touches on some of the things that actually matter in the world. And then there's another film that I'm blanking on right now, but those two are great examples.
Fantastic. Ready for another question?
Let's do it.
Okay, so this question is, in our community, here in Garrett County, there's been a lot of dialogue about white privilege, and many people question its existence because they themselves are low income or living in poverty. The idea is that they've had a quote unquote a hard life, and therefore do not feel as though they have benefited from being white. Taylor touches on this idea when Ryan is pleading for his life, and she states, "You grew up poor, Ryan. You never had to worry about being shot if you had a hoodie on while walking down the street." Do you have any message for people who may feel this way, or any advice for those of us who seek to counter this idea?
Absolutely. So the whole point for me, honestly, is to create empathy. I don't think we have enough of it. And on either side of any issue, it would be very easy for me to write a play that just comes from an African American point of view, because I have that. But it was very important to me to also include the Caucasian characters in the play, their point of view as well, because America isn't fair to a lot of people. And although, I have my perspective, and I can tell you.
You want a chair?
Oh, thanks.
You know what? You should be on your knees.
No,
you made us be on our knees for a month.
I know. I just think that we need to listen to everyone on all sides. I'm not going to get into, excuse my language, but a pissing match with anyone as far as saying who went through it worse, right? I don't think that's necessarily helpful in this situation. I think that we all are going through really difficult times. And so I would say to people who grew up poor and didn't have great opportunities, that's also an issue and something that needs to be brought up. I do think that for me, I don't know who those people are, but I would try to be as empathetic as I can for that plight. I also just ask in return that I get the same amount of empathy, especially, with a lot of the horrible things that have happened to people of color over the course of American history. Empathy is the thing that will bring us together. And I think it's the thing that we're lacking the most today. And if we don't find a way to have it, we'll just end up being more and more divided. And in the end, the world might look like this play, which is exactly what I don't want.
Wow, that's powerful. This question's from Matthew. As a former resident of Garrett County, do you hope that any other particular message from the play resonates with Garrett Countyans?
I think the message that I would encourage people to take from this is that there is no arriving, that the work never stops. And so working toward the empathy that Carlton is talking about, working toward creating a world that truly has equity is not something where like Ryan and Taylor's character feel like they're woke, that they understand, and it's the other people's problem. It's the other white people. It's not them. I would encourage people to constantly turn the mirror back on themselves and really ask a lot of the questions that Latoya's character Jordan asks in the play. Like, where are your scars? What are you doing? Are you typing? Are you reposting things on Facebook? Are you an armchair activist, or are you actually helping? So I think that's the big message that I would send everybody in Garrett County. I'm very proud of my county. And that has been a very hard thing to say over the last 10 years or so. This is something that is a bright light to me, this opening up of this chapter. And I encourage you all to continue with the work and pass it on to younger generations.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Okay, so next question. It's about the heartbeat that we did throughout the play. We hear a beating heart throughout the play, oftentimes at the peak of conflict between the characters, but not always. Was this intended to symbolize? What was this intended to symbolize? Is this intended to represent one character's beating heart?
Oh, I have a hard time answering that question because it's really beautiful when people watch something and find their own meaning from it. And so it's interesting. And even you saying that, I'm like, it could mean a lot of different things. If you're asking me for what I thought in putting the heartbeat in.
Yes, please.
It's there's a level of anxiety that BIPOC people feel. I guess I'll speak for myself, that I feel on a daily basis. And when certain things are brought up in conversation, or I see things on TV, or I see things in the street, or I'm having experiences, I begin to get overwhelmed. And so the heartbeat is meant to, for Jordan's character specifically, it's meant to symbolize for her that she's kind of going into an anxiety and a panic attack, technically. But emotionally, what's really happening in the play is that the circumstances are coming together in such a way that it's forcing her to speak her truth. And I think that that's very important to me, because for a very long time, I've silenced myself in order to make sure that everyone was safe and taken care of, and make sure I didn't ruffle any feathers, or to make sure that other people weren't afraid of me, to be honest with you. And I think we do that a lot.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that myself.
Yeah, especially it happens, I think the biggest moment of it is towards the end of the play, right before her big speech, and she has, her issues and she freaks out. So you're seeing kind of the symptoms of a panic attack, but also what it really is I think for the first time, Jordan as herself, speaking for herself as a Black woman about how she feels about everything, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. Just allowing her to speak is so important.
Can I say something to that too? So there were several iterations of the show, of the play. And I think in getting feedback from us as his friends who were playing these characters, Carlton was able to give himself permission to let out all of the rage and the anger and the whole host of emotions that he was feeling. Because initially with the first two drafts, I think he was trying to be nice. It's a thing that sometimes we feel like we have to play the game. We have to be nice so that we don't ruffle any feathers. We don't hurt anybody's feelings. And especially with us living in mostly predominantly white communities, we feel like, if they think we're this way, we may not get work, or people may stop associating themselves with us. And it took a couple of iterations of us saying, this isn't actually how I feel, or this is what I say. If it were me, I would say this. I think for you to let yourself go and say, I'm going to give myself permission to be really pissed off, to be really angry, and to let people know that this is what I'm feeling. And then asking, for the help of his friends like LaToya, to say, I'm not a Black woman. What would you say? And then getting that feedback and getting that specific, response, and then, putting in and saying, all right, I'm just going to be really, really vulnerable right here and put it on the table and, let you be adults and be responsible for your own feelings and figure out how you feel about it after I get it out there, because that's not his responsibility. That's yours as an audience member, as a partaker, as a patron of the arts. It's up to you. The onus is on you to figure out what you feel about it and what you're going to do with what you're going to do with it afterwards. The responsibility as artists to give you the art. We can't give you everything. We can just put our art out there, and you got to figure out what you want to do with it.
Yeah. And so really quick, thank you for saying that, Dee Dee. It's important to know, I should say this, I didn't think about it, but it's important to know two things. One, that monologue that Jordan says at the end was shaped a little bit by me and Jerry, the director of Plan B, but LaToya wrote that monologue. And like she said, I did ask for her perspective in that because I didn't have that. I didn't have the female perspective. And I also wanted her to be able to speak her truth on stage for probably the first time ever. The other thing about that is, in order to speak your truth or to use your voice, you have to understand what you want to say. And one of the things that's upset me most about this play is that it's taken me 37 years to be in a place where I have an opinion because I've relied on everyone else's opinion so much. So while I was writing the play in real time, I had to start to try to figure out what I actually felt. And it was in there, just buried under layers and layers of other people's opinions. And so I literally had to write through and ask myself what I was feeling. And that's basically what turned into the play.
Wow, fantastic answers. There's so many levels we can go with this. So we tried limiting to 10 questions, and I think we're on question number 6 here. Let's we got to talk about Cameron. What's going on with Cameron? There's some discussion about Cameron being scared of the sitting order, and some question about whether he was blackmailed or otherwise pressured into supporting the cause. What was this trying to represent? Does this relate to why he was murdered?
You want to talk about that? What do you think?
I'll put in my 2 cents. The opportunity to speak my truth, like Carlton was just saying, being biracial myself, growing up in a predominantly white community, state, schools, I could relate easily to Cameron because of said pressure. People trying to define you, and for their own sake. Countless numbers of times as a child, people would inquire, what are you? And it wasn't, malicious, but in order for them to categorize and make logic of it and move on and compartmentalize in some instances, it was trying to find the truth. And it took a long time to find a truth because there is a lot of pressure out there, especially if there's not a lot of one side or the other to engage with or to inquire with or to interact with. The social media pressure is humongous right now. The need to fit in, the need to fall on one side of the line or the other. One of the most beautiful things that I've heard in discussions as people have left that have been relayed, to the cast and to Carlton, is people realizing that they don't have to make a stand or plant their flag on one side or the other. One of the biggest things that I wanted the world to be when I grew up and had children was that having a mixed ethnical background wouldn't matter. And it wasn't until the year 2000 I finally filled out a form that had the bubble mixed. But before that, I
remember that bubble.
I had to be categorized. And I remember going to my teacher in first grade taking the SAT, and I said, which one do I pick? Because they drilled in your head, if you fill in too many bubbles or draw in the box you're not supposed to, the test will burn into flames or blow up or something. So my whole life kind of reflected Cameron's struggle of which side he was going to be. And then when he has that statement, that saying, that monologue at the end where he talks about his mother, he can relate honestly in his heart, in his soul to his mother, but he never saw his mother as being Black. He saw her as being his mother, but saw the struggles that she had to endure. And it's easy to fall prey to pressure, from social networks, from friends, from schools, from athletic teams, from political affiliations, from anything else that makes you feel guilty for thinking against the grain or trying to swim upstream. And one of the most beautiful things, the whole place is beautiful. I've told you that for a month. But when Dee Dee gets up at the end, and I'm assuming she's up because I'm face down dead and I'm just listening to it. And she says, amber waves of gray. And there's so many waves of gray that Jordan speaks to. And she keeps telling Cameron, haven't we learned this? It doesn't have to be black or white. And when people start to realize that you don't have to categorize. It's okay to be unknown. There's no fear in that, in the true sense of the word ignorance, of not knowing. It's okay. And then you can not have to rely and fold into that pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, the real question. Why was your character shot?
What's that?
Why was Cameron's character shot?
Yeah, so this question's come up a lot. And I think that I think that true evil doesn't have reasoning. It's random, right? And I think that when you're not careful, like LaToya's character was saying, you can become that. I'll be more specific. A lot of this was built off of the ideology of the Nazi Party and how they did things back in their time. And one of the things that was really scary about Hitler and that whole regime is that you didn't know if you were safe or not, ever. It was always fear-based. So there's two reasons for it. The first reason is that Cameron is sent there to convert his friends, and he fails, and so he's got to go. The second reason is that Dee Dee's character does this all the time. This is a soldier in the ranks. I think in this world, which has actually happened in the real world before, he doesn't really matter to the greater success of this thing. He just doesn't. And that kind of fear is something I wanted people to feel, because we're so close to it. We're so close to it. We're not that far from that. It's something that the audience doesn't expect. The people who are being interrogated are Ryan and Taylor and Melvin and Jordan, and you think that Cameron's safe, to an extent. And the fact that he's not really means that no one is safe, because no one is safe. And I think that one of the problems that we are living in today is that we in our privilege, even in my own privilege, we get to sit somewhere and eat food and take a shower and do these things and feel like we're safe. But in the interim of the whole world, it could be us at any time. That's definitely not safe. So before it gets to everyone's not safe, the whole point is that let's try to figure it out. So before it gets there, it's a jarring thing. it's an ugly thing, and so it's in the play. I hope that's a good answer.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much. Okay, so next question. Malcolm X gave a speech in which he said, "The most disrespected woman in America is a Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is a Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman." And we see this as an undercurrent in Jordan's powerful monologue about the experience of Black womanhood in America and the problems that Black women singularly experience. This play was written by Mr. Bluford, and I wonder what Black women in his life informed this monologue. What did the process of writing the monologue look like? As a Black woman performing the monologue, is there anything you added to the script or anything you would have liked to see included that was not?
Oh boy. Hi. Honestly, Carlton's been writing this play for 2 years. And the question that always came up to me of being hesitant about diving into it truly was the missing perspective of the Black woman in this country. I remember specifically that we read, I think a second time or a third time, of what the development process was. And it was when we heard the verdict of Breonna Taylor. And to be frank, it still destroys me every single day, to be honest. And reading the play, I was so angry this time around, because I was like, when I first read it, it was like this, like, oh my God, like this is what? But now I was like really pissed off because Carlton is one of my best friends. And I told him, I was like, we're missing the Black woman experience in this show. And I can't, everything that Taylor says is not the thing that a Black woman is even thinking about. I mean, I can't speak for, I'm not trying to speak for all Black women in this country, but I mean, I got Dee Dee. But everything that Taylor says,
The Jordan said?
or that Taylor says in her monologue sparked me so much as just myself that I was like, that's not even what Jordan is thinking about, you know? And I was like, and I feel like we're not even tapping into that conversation. And so Carlton, the next day, because I was just like, and you know, still feeling my intense feelings, he reached out to me. Did we talk on the phone or did you text me?
It might have been an email.
It was something.
Yeah.
And he said, would you feel comfortable writing out your thoughts and from Jordan's perspective? And it scared the crap out of me because I didn't even know where to start. But I said yes, which I'm trying to lean into that fear because you can learn a lot from fear, really. And I sat down and I allowed myself to just write. And at first, I think it was actually originally 5 pages of trying to convey my experience, but even like the experiences I've heard from other Black females in this country, friends, my mom, my sisters, historically, all those things, even conversations I've had with white friends who were like, oh, the law, like, did you hear that the law passed that you can wear your hair natural? And I was like, why are we celebrating something that I should just be able to do because it's my hair that grows out of my head? But we have to pass laws for me to be able to wear that so I don't get discriminated against for jobs or get sent home because my hair is considered inappropriate or whatever. While I'm watching my friend or a coworker that I worked with walking, who's a white woman wearing dreads. And someone saying, ooh, that looks good on you. But then I'm reading articles about Black children that they can't wrestle because their hair is in locks and they have to cut it off because a coach says that they have to so they can compete because their hair was not in the rule book. So a lot of that came from being the experience of what it is to be Black in this country. And then I handed it over to Carlton and I said, and I didn't hear from him. And I was like, so it was bad? It was bad? And he reached out and said, no. And that's where we are today. There are certain things that aren't in there now, and also how it was shaped needed to say what it needed to say in this world. That makes sense.
Yeah, you have to understand, I didn't want to, the reason why the monologue is as big as it is because I did not want to silence her as much as possible. However, I mean, we could write 3 or 4 more plays just on that. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you again for an amazing answer. Okay, so we got 3 more questions, just so you know. Let's see. Number 8, Black nationalism is considered radical, yet we so often celebrate historical Black nationalists today. Fred Hampton of the Black Panther Party and Malcolm X are probably the most recognizable examples. Black nationalism is obviously discussed extensively in the play, and while the audience is left to decide exactly how they feel about what is right and wrong with the actions of the Black nationalists, do you think there is a place for Black nationalism in social justice movements today?
Wow, that's a really big question. Yes?
Move on to the next question.
I don't, you know, the word radical is very interesting to me because what's radical? So, to me, you know, yeah, something that might be radical is doing what the French did in their revolution, which is, you know, going into politicians' house, pulling them out of their houses and murdering them in the streets. Now, to me, that's radical. If you're talking about making marches, being angry, trying to speak outwardly while police officers are gassing you or hitting you with things, I don't think that's necessarily radical. I think that the whole premise of America is freedom of speech and being able to speak up and talk about what's wrong. So my initial answer is yes, because I don't personally think that any Black nationalism is radical or intended to hurt anyone.
And the history books are wrong. I'm just going to put that in there. So the history books are wrong about Black nationalism and all that stuff is that's not true. A lot of Black folks are looking out for community members and always have been. It's all this other stuff trying to minimize and dehumanize us. So we are deemed as something that is perceived as negative when actually what we're trying to do is just be seen as human beings and have a full life. And unfortunately in this country, we have to fight for that when we shouldn't have to, but we will fight for it because we deserve it. We're humans, period.
And the radical moniker never really appeared until there was a threat.
Exactly.
To the status quo. I mean, as somebody who studied Malcolm X all through high school, because I was taught the teachings of Martin Luther King in school, because it was no longer seen as a threat. He was seen as radical during his time by a large majority or a large population in the country. But once he was no longer a threat and he unfortunately passed, he was reversed. And it might have been, like Jordan says, self-preservation at that point for some people to change their perspective of it. Same with Malcolm X. He wasn't seen as a radical after he made his he made his trip to Mecca and came back and realized that he had himself been bamboozled in the proper way to address the equality or the equity that he was striving for in the country. Malcolm only really stated that if you're going to hit me, I'm going to hit back. And how many people teach their kids that on the playground? And being a first grade teacher, I see it constantly. But when that threat disappears, the radical moniker or the label seems to dissipate as well. So it's almost like it's put up there as a warning or a siren for specific mentalities that make people feel uncomfortable or they see as a threat to the status quo.
Hey, y'all, Jerry here. The thing that I like to remind people when this conversation comes up, this topic comes up, particularly in relation to Black Panther, the Black Panther movement, is that the Black Panthers were also the creators of Head Start. And it just goes to the point that Dee Dee was making earlier that community for all is really hard to arrive at. And some communities, particularly communities of color, actually have a lot to share in terms of how to mobilize and how to care for and how to celebrate community. And now I have to go help my kid take a bath. That's my whole contribution to this conversation.
Thank you for chiming in, Jay. We really appreciate it. Wow, this is powerful. This is powerful stuff. I mean, I think it's okay just as long as it fits in the right box, right? In terms of the whitewashing of the image of historical figures, a period of time passes and we're okay with it for some reason because all those granular details pass away like grains of sand or something, but what are we left with? So, trying to celebrate the entirety of the person, the entirety of the history of what they represented, and making sure that we preserve that history so that future generations can understand the whole context of these things. So really appreciate these answers. These are great. Okay, so next question. The vote of who gets to live and die at the end of the play is incredibly powerful and such a gut punch. What was the symbolism of the vote? Did you ever have audiences vote a different way?
Yeah, this is a hard one. Because I honestly, and maybe naively, wasn't sure how, I didn't think people would actually vote because it was so hard for me to, the situation is meant to reflect a feeling I have, and our American system of voting. Sometimes you just feel like there is no good choice, but you have to vote, and people died for your right to vote, and you should vote. But I just feel like sometimes there's a sense of hopelessness to that. Our audiences varied, and it was different every night, but they all did vote for Ryan and Taylor to die. And that honestly broke my heart every night. I wouldn't have rathered it the other way. I wouldn't have rathered any of the ways. But as I watched the show every night, I found it hard for me to raise my hand and vote for someone to live or die. And I think that when you see people, when you're in front of people, even in a theater experience, it becomes hard. When you're sitting across from someone on Facebook or on some social media platform, or you're hearing about someone over there, it becomes very easy to demonize them and to say hurtful slurs about them and to wish even death upon them, because you can't see that human. There's no connection there. And I wanted that last moment to symbolize how our decisions affect other people. I keep coming back to empathy, and I keep beating a dead horse about it because we don't have any. We're running really low on it, and that was one of the hardest parts of the show for people. They walked away speechless or crying and sending texts to Jerry Rapier explaining why they didn't vote, which is a lot to think about.
Back. I have a comment about that.
Welcome back.
So something I didn't share with y'all today, which everyone might find interesting, is the first time anyone expressed to me, this wonderful woman that's been coming to our shows since the beginning of our company 31 years ago said to me, I have to say, I wanted to vote for the women. And I thought that was a lovely thing to hear on the last performance of the show. She was really moved, and that was where hope and empathy lived for her.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so we're on the last question. Okay, let me start off with it. This is a long one. Okay, so we see Jordan, Melvin, Ryan, and Taylor all have moments that vacillate between the sides represented in the play. Jordan is vehemently opposed to the actions of the Obsidian Order, but points out how wrong Ryan and Taylor are about the experiences of Black people in America and the role that white people have played in their struggle for equality. Melvin is seemingly much more receptive to, or at least curious about, the Obsidian Order, but is ultimately willing to give his light to stand with Ryan. Both Ryan and Taylor sympathize yet push back on the views expressed by Cameron and Chris. You fully captured the nuance that exists both interpersonally, illustrating that races are not monoliths, and also interpersonally. And by that I mean that you also do a great job of pointing out that nuance can exist within one person's belief system. Is there any character that you identify with the most, or any one overarching message that you hope people take from the play?
Okay, so is this question specifically for me?
It's for everybody. Anybody who wants to jump in.
Perfect. Okay. Because the reason I asked is because I do want to give anyone else a chance to answer that question as well for them. Because for me, I grew up in Utah. I grew up surrounded by white people, and many of them on countless occasions saved my life. I had a neighbor who, during a flash flood, literally pulled me out of the streets before I drowned, and then went into my house and got my brother before he drowned, saved my life. I literally had a friend who drove me to the hospital, not because my appendix broke, but because I had stomach issues. I have a lot of white friends who have been there for me my entire life. It is perfectly, being a human is very interesting because you can be two things at once. You can be completely angry at all white people for all the things that have happened to Black people. And you can also love white people who have saved your life. You can be both. And so I guess for me, like we're saying, it's nuanced. I'm personally more of a humanist. I regardless of your race, creed, ethnicity, man or woman, I don't want anyone to be hurt or die. I want all of us to live together and to try to be better. And so I just thought it was important to share that. I don't know if that answers that question, but it is nuanced. And I have had arguments with my friends about race and about the situation we're in, and I would still die for them because I love them. Did you guys want to say anything else about that?
It's nuanced.
I mean, I guess I'll say something. Like, I feel very similar to Carlton. Like, I grew up in Utah, very like Davis County, which here in Utah is just like it's very white, and we were like the only Black family on the corner. That story. And some of my dearest friends who I consider like family are white. And I very much am Jordan, where I do believe in humans. I do believe in humanity. I do believe in empathy. I do believe that difficult conversations need to happen and consistently happen for change to move forward, and that people need to listen instead of trying to come at it trying to be right. There's a different kind of thing of saving relationships, and being open to hearing each other's experiences in this world. And no one, I mean, the sitting in order is, I mean, personally, as a Black woman, I would ride or die for that. I would stand and fight for what is right. And that's not the right way to go about bringing people together. So it is nuanced in its own regard, because how can you just like let all of that go when, if it is you're in that situation with your friends that have been so impactful in your life? I don't think that's going to be like, yep, I'm doing that instead. I think it's a really, really complex situation that I hope we never have to come to ever.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I would just implore folks in Garrett County, where I know we're trying really hard, to listen and not try to correct. Listen. That's the first thing that's being asked.
And thank you for listening.
Wow.
And thank you for listening. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Everybody give a round of applause. Yeah. Allow it. Come on. This is a small mic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And we've heard that there's a bit of a surprise. Something about a movie.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're nailing some things down, but we're trying to. There's a friend of mine who out here who read the script and has a production company, wants to film it. So we're gonna try to do that. Hopefully in a few months here, we're gonna get everyone back together, knock the dust off, and try to make this thing into another living thing, so that more people can see it and share it and have more opinions on it as well. And I do want to throw out here that how insanely important it is to have these conversations, and how awesome it is that you guys are doing stuff like this. It's not a small thing. It's a very big thing. And I'm eternally grateful for it. So thank you for this opportunity, and also thank you for what you guys are doing out there in Matt's hometown. It's really important.
All right, one more round of applause from the crowd. I think we're going to call it a night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Devin.
Thank you all. Hi, Samantha.
Hey, that was great.
I'm going to close this out.
Okay.
All right. I'll see you tomorrow night.
See you tomorrow night.
All right. Bye.
Bye.